All right. Welcome, everybody. If we got anybody to come in, I'll get them admitted in here in a minute. But as of right now, we'll go and get started. So let everybody else have their nights back and everything. All right, let me share my screen. All right, guys, you might notice another person on here that you don't know the name. His name's Andrew Wiley. He's one of my friends. He's actually studying for his TSSP, and I had lunch with him yesterday. He said he's welcome to join this and get some good information. So you might see him on there. Let's see here. Let me get the presentation started. All right, can y'all see my screen?
Yep.
Cool. Good deal. Let me see if I can get this guy minimized. Go backwards. All right, so week 5, we're in chapter 2 of the Cybex book. This week we're going to go a little bit over security governance, mostly over risk. We're going to really get into quantitative analysis this week. I saved qualitative for next week. The reason I did that is because there's so many kind of formulas and stuff that you kind of need to pay attention to, and some other key factors that you're going to need to be aware of that will help you with other things going down the road. So focus on that this week, and then we'll get on to the qualitative next week and get deeper into it there. All right. Good deal. Let me move these guys out of my way again so I can see what I'm doing. All right, here we go. All right, security governance. We've mentioned security governance in chapter 1 a little bit. We're going to get a little deeper into it here, just so you can kind of get a broader understanding. Security governance is a collection of practices related to supporting, defining, and directing the security efforts of an organization. When combined with IT and organizational governance, the goal is to maintain business processes while striving towards growth and resiliency. Third-party governance is the system of oversight that may be mandated by law, regulation, and industry standards, contractual obligation, or licensing requirements. This generally involves the outside investigator or auditor. You can think about this with Microsoft audits. You can think about it with FINRA, SEC, SOX auditing, because it does have that third-party kind of outside coming in and assessing us. We had where McAfee was trying to audit us this week, but we got that pushed away since we've kind of stopped using a lot of their stuff, thankfully. It's just another process that I had put to Jonathan and he don't have to worry about, which is great. That's kind of what you think about when you think about third-party governance, as far as another outsider coming into your organization. Now, you could be a third party to another organization as well, right, supplying them services and stuff, and that's where you would have them audited if they were in that situation. Another aspect of third-party governance is the application of security oversight on the third parties that your organization relies on, right? So this goes on to product services that we deal with. You would consider these outsourced aspects of the business, as again, security guards, maintenance, technical support, accounting services, Microsoft Office 365, use Azure, AWS, Carbon Black, several services that we subscribe to, QuickBase, those kind of things are those outside organizations that we rely on to do our business. These providers need to stay in compliance with the primary organization's security stance. Otherwise, they could pose additional risk and vulnerability to the organization. Auditors performing on-site assessment or audits need to follow auditing protocols, such as control objectives for information and related technology, COVID, and have a specific checklist or requirements to investigate. Now, I mentioned in chapter 1, that COVID's really followed by auditors whenever they're coming in to do IT audits and some business audits. It's a really good framework that's easy to flow through for auditors. So I believe that, you're going to find that a lot of companies that do auditing, Deloitte, E&Y, and those kind of companies that come in and do audits do base a lot of their audits off of COVID. So just as, again, a memory kind of thing there. Documentation review is the process of reading and the exchange materials and verifying them against standards and expectations. The documentation review is typically performed before any on-site inspection takes place. These documents normally include the organizational security policy and self-assessment reports. Whenever you do a Microsoft audit, we did SOX audits, FINRA, those kind of things, they send you these large questionnaires of information they want to gather before they actually come in. It helps them create a basic understanding of where you are based on what they're auditing. And that way when they come in and they meet with you in person or they're doing an on-site, they're getting a more ingrained, rich understanding of what they're going a deeper stance into what you're looking and what they have for you, right? So they're really getting in detail after they come on site to help them get a better understanding of those things they already questioned you about. And in many ways, it also, tends to be that, they do these paper audits in the beginning to get this question and stuff, and it's going to help them to understand some flaws or some gaps that you might have, so that they prepare bringing with them recommendations for you to resolve those situations or what they would like you to be able to resolve. In many situations, especially related to government or military agencies or contractors, failing to provide sufficient documentation to meet requirements of third-party governance can result in a loss of or voiding of authorization to operate. Complete and sufficient documentation can often maintain against existing ATO or provide a temporary ATO, called a TITO. Once an ATO is lost or revoked, a complete documentation review and on-site review showing full compliance is required before the ATO can be reestablished. You're going to find this purely with government, right? You're not going to see this in any kind of private sector type situation. You're just not going to see it. So very rare that you're ever going to see this ever again. Even in other course material, I don't see it very often, but I want to make sure I called it out just in case you do run across it. Security is aimed at preventing loss or disclosure of data while sustaining authorized access. The possibility that something could happen to damage, destroy, or disclose data or other resources is known as risk. Understanding risk management concepts is essential to the establishment of a sufficient security stance, proper security governance, and legal proof of due care and due diligence. Remember, you have to show to anyone that comes in to audit you that you are doing your best to provide due care and due diligence. Very important. Risk management is a detailed process of identifying factors that could damage or disclose data, evaluating factors in light of data value and countermeasure costs, and implementing cost-effective solutions for mitigating or reducing risk. The overall process for risk management issued to reduce risk and to support the mission of the organization. The primary goal is to reduce risk to acceptable level. The level actually is dependent on the organization, the value of the assets, and the size of its budgets, and many other factors. One organization may accept a certain risk while another might consider it a high level of risk. It is impossible to totally eliminate risk. However, significant risk reduction is possible, usually with low effort. Right? So when you're looking at your risk assessments and you're going through this stuff and you're trying to figure out what what the asset value is compared to what the exposure factor is, which we'll get into in a little bit, realize there's no way you can reduce all the risk. Okay, I can't get in my car every day and drive to work and expect that I have no risk of getting in an accident, right? We automatically have that understanding that there is a slight chance that that could happen, right? So the same thing goes with any other type of situation. You can't eliminate it. No matter what you put in place, there's either going to be something out there like a loophole, there's going to be some sort of flaw out there that could be taken advantage of that could still give you even 1% of risk. So realize that you can't, it's like nothing is 100% guaranteed, to always operate. There's no 100% system uptime. There's just no way for that to happen. You can't guarantee that. You can guarantee 7 nines of availability, but there's still how many nines left, It's never going to be fully eliminated. There are IT infrastructure risks as well as risks from non-computer sources. Failing to properly evaluate and respond to all forms of risk will leave the company vulnerable. IT security is commonly referred to as logical and technical security and can only provide protection against logical and technical attacks. The process by which the goals of risk management are achieved is known as risk analysis. It includes examining an environment for risks, evaluating each threat event as to its likelihood of occurring, and the cost of the damage it would cause if it did occur, assessing the cost of various countermeasures of each risk, and creating a cost-benefit report or cost-benefit analysis for safeguards to present to upper management. Risk management terminology. Asset. An asset is anything with an environment in the environment that should be protected. It is anything used in a business process or task. It can be a computer program, a file, product, appliance, furniture, recipes, intellectual environment, personnel, facilities, and so on. An asset valuation, AV, this is the dollar amount assigned to an asset based on actual costs and non-monetary expenses. These can include costs to develop, maintain, administer, advertise, support, repair, and replace an asset. They can also include public confidence, industry support, productivity enhancement, knowledge equity, and ownership benefits. These go into, your maintenance costs every year, your upgrade costs, all that kind of stuff that takes to make sure that the value of that asset stays solid, or it holds its value over time. A vulnerability is a flaw, loophole, oversight, error, limitation, frailty, or susceptibility in the IT infrastructure or any other aspect of an organization. If the vulnerability is exploited, loss or damage to assets can occur. Exposure. Exposure is being susceptible to asset loss because of a threat. There is possibility that a vulnerability can or will be exploited by a threat, agent, or event. The quantitative risk analysis value of exposure factor, EF, is derived from this concept. Risk is the possibility or likelihood that a threat will exploit a vulnerability to cause harm to an asset. The more likely it is that a threat event will occur, the greater the risk. A good example is, how often does, a fire happen in California or an earthquake happen in California, right? The likelihood of that happening is very high. So that threat value is going to be very high for that particular type of situation. Every instance of exposure is a risk. When written as a formula, risk can be defined as follows. Risk equals threat times vulnerability. Thus, reducing either the target agent or the vulnerability directly results in reduction in the risk. When a risk is realized, a threat agent, a threat actor, or even a threat event has taken advantage of a vulnerability and has harmed and caused harm to or disclosed one or more assets. The whole purpose of security is to prevent risk from becoming realized by removing vulnerabilities and blocking threat agents and threat events from jeopardizing assets. As a risk management tool, security is the implementation of safeguards. Safeguards. A safeguard, security control, or countermeasure is anything that removes or reduces a vulnerability or protects against one or more specific threats. These can be installing a software patch, making a configuration change, hiring security guards, altering the infrastructure, modifying processes, improving the security policy, training personnel more effectively, electrifying a perimeter fence, installing lights, and so on. Safeguards are all only means by which risk is mitigated or removed. You're going to see safeguards also slash countermeasure repeated several times, just so you know they're the same thing. Attack, the exploitation of vulnerability by a threat agent. An attack is any intentional attempt to exploit a vulnerability of an organization's security infrastructure to cause damage, loss, or disclosure of an asset. An attack can also be viewed as any violation or failure to an organization's security policy. A breach is the occurrence of a security mechanism being bypassed or thwarted by a threat agent. When a breach is combined with an attack, A penetration or intrusion can result. A penetration is the condition in which a threat agent has gained access to the organization's infrastructure. As you can see, starting at the top, threats exploit vulnerabilities. Then the vulnerabilities is which result in exposure, which is risk, which is mitigated by the safeguards or countermeasures, which protect the assets, which are endangered by the threats. So it's a holistic type of cycle here you go through, and you'll see as we go through this how you evaluate each one of these threats, which turns into a risk that you can put a value on under the quantitative methodology. And as we get into qualitative, you'll see where it goes a high, medium, low type of thing later next week. Everybody understand that? Cool. All right. Common threats and vulnerabilities. These are just a quick list. Of course, not all-encompassing, right? We could have all kinds of different threats out there and vulnerabilities, but just a quick list. Viruses, criminal activity, intentional attacks, epidemics, hackers, disgruntled employees, human error, natural disasters, physical damage, data misuse, buffer overflows, high temperatures, information warfare, theft, and social engineering. Risk assessment analysis. This is primarily an exercise for upper management. It is their responsibility to initiate and support risk analysis and assessment by defining the scope and purpose of the endeavor. The processes are often delegated to security professionals. The results, decisions, and outcomes must be understood and approved by upper management as an element in providing prudent due care. Remember that prudent due care has to be shown by the executive or board level body. The ownership of risk is at the board level. It is not at anyone else in the company. We help support their flow of how risk should be managed, but they overly own the risk. So they delegate us to manage those risks or those processes to reduce the risk amount. All IT systems have risk, and there is no way to eliminate it fully. Kind of mentioned that earlier. Upper management must decide which risks are acceptable and which are not. And that's going to be different vastly among different types of organizations. It's going to be different among different types of departments. Depending on who is dealing with those particular risks, they're going to have a different degree or grade of what they think that risk really is. Once you have a list of threats, you must evaluate each one of them and its associated risk. And again, there are two different types of risk methodologies, quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative analysis assigns real dollar figures to the loss of an asset. Qualitative analysis assigns a subjective and an intangible value to the loss of an asset. The best guess. It's something that, you think that it's worth, right? But it's not something you could actually put in a dollar value, because that's only in the quantitative side. Both methods are necessary for a complete risk analysis. Most environments employ a hybrid approach of both methodologies in order to gain a balanced view of their security concerns. Quantitative risk analysis. The quantitative method results in a concrete probability percentages. Right? It always ends in a percentage, in a dollar value type of scenario. The end result is a report that has dollar figures for levels of risk, potential loss, cost of countermeasures, and values of safeguards. Think of quantitative analysis as the act of assigning a quantity to risk. In other words, placing a dollar figure on each asset and threat. A purely quantitative analysis is not sufficient. Not all elements and aspects of the analysis can be quantified because some are qualitative, subjective, or intangible. The process of quantitative risk analysis. The process starts with asset valuation and threat identification, right? Next, you eliminate the potential and frequency of each risk. The information is then used to calculate various cost functions that are used to evaluate safeguards or countermeasures. The 6 major steps or phases of quantitative risk analysis are as follows. Inventory assets and assign a value, also known as asset value or AV. You're going to see the acronyms a lot going through these formulas and stuff, so make sure you pay attention to that. Number 2, research each asset and produce a list of all possible threats for each individual asset. Each listed threat calculates the exposure factor and single loss expectancy. We'll get into that in a little bit. Just remember that when you're going through there and you're evaluating these assets, you got to really step back and think, and it's going to take more than just one person and one brain to think about all of the different possible threats that could affect that asset, right? So whenever you're going through this, you're going through an internal risk assessment, make sure that you have several smart people with you in the room that know about those type of assets and can help you think about those other things that could possibly affect it as a threat. Perform a threat analysis to calculate the likelihood of each threat being realized within a single year. That is the annualized rate of occurrence. Derive the overall loss potential per threat by calculating the annualized loss expectancy, or ALE. Research countermeasures for each threat, and then calculate the changes to ARO and ALE based on applied countermeasure. Perform a cost-benefit analysis of each countermeasure for each threat for each asset. Select the most appropriate response to each threat. I know that was a lot. We'll get into it, clarify it here in a minute. Here's a good, diagram to kind of show you how it kind of climbs through, right? So we start with the asset value. We calculate our exposure factor. Then we calculate our single loss expectancy. We assess the annualized rate of occurrence. And we derive the annualized loss expectancy, which goes into performing the cost-benefit analysis of countermeasures. The cost functions associated with quantitative risk analysis include the exposure factor, single loss expectancy, annualized rate of occurrence, and annualized loss expectancy. Exposure factor. The value represents the percentage of loss that an organization would experience if a specific asset were violated by a realized risk. The exposure factor can also be called the loss potential. In most cases, a realized risk does not result in total loss of an asset. Fire breaks out in a data center. Well, if there's countermeasures in place, such as sprinklers, well, they're going to reduce the impact of damage to that entire facility. Now, it might damage a lot of stuff with the water and the fire together, right? But at the same time, it's not going to be a total destruction of that asset. Another way to look at exposure factor is thinking of it as an actual or anticipated damage from a threat. Exposure factor is expressed as a percentage, right? So as you see down here, 0.00 is 0%, 0.5 is 50%, and 1 is 100%. Single loss expectancy, SLE. You need exposure factor to calculate single loss expectancy. It is associated with a single realized risk against a specific asset. It indicates the exact amount of loss an organization would experience if an asset were harmed by a specific threat occurring. Asset value, dollar, times exposure factor, EF, is the single loss expectancy. Okay, so EF is a number between 0 and 1, right? So it could be a 0.25%, could be a 0.5%, 0.75%, or 100%, which is 1, right? And it represents the percentage value of that. So, for example, we've got $1 million times the asset value. Then you got times the exposure factor, which is a quarter, right? You get $250,000 is your actual single loss expectancy. So, if my warehouse was worth $1 million, but the exposure factor from something happening is quarter of it, well, that actual single loss expectancy for that is $250,000. The damage for a single fire in a warehouse, as I kind of mentioned. Annualized rate of occurrence. The expected frequency with which a specific threat or risk will occur or become realized within a single year. The ARO calculation is also known as a probability determination. You're going to see it in mostly everything you ever see those ARO, just so you know. Here's the equation for it. So number of incidents divided by number of years equals your ARO. So the example below, we got 2 fires per year, right? How many incidents do we have here? So we got one type of incident, 2 years. So you got one. So you got an ARO 2, right? So again, we get down to the 1 fire per 10 years. Your ARO is 0.1, right? Because it's happening you got it broken out over the 10-year cycle. Everybody get that? Okay. I'm going to take silence as a yes. Okay. Annualized loss expectancy, ALE. The possible yearly cost of all instances of a specific realized threat against a specific asset, represented as a dollar amount. So ALE equals single loss expectancy times annualized rate of occurrence, or SLE times ARO equals ALE, right? So 250,000 times 2 fires per year equals $500,000 per year ALE. This becomes your budget cap for spending on a particular control. So when you're going through these things, you want to say, okay, I want to know how much I need to budget this year for protection in case I have a loss in my warehouse. Well, in this particular situation, we're going to say my max cap of protection there is $500,000 for the year. In personal, though, you should probably just move your warehouse somewhere else, but apparently got a bad fire problem in that situation. Safeguards of the risk analysis. The goal of implementing safeguards is to reduce the number of times an attack is successful in causing damage to an asset. The best of all possible safeguards would be to reduce ARO to 0, right? But we know that can't happen. Although there are some perfect safeguards, most of them aren't. What's the best way to keep your computer from getting a virus? Unplug the sucker from the network, right? From the internet. That would be a perfect safeguard, but it's not actual. You can't really do that, right? It's not going to be beneficial because you can't do anything. In addition to determining the actual cost of a safeguard, you must calculate the ALE for the asset if the safeguard is implemented. This requires a new exposure factor and a new ARO specific to the safeguard. In most cases, the exposure factor will remain the same even with the newly applied safeguard, because if the safeguard fails, the exposure factor is the same as it was prior to the implementation of safeguard. There was an example in your book that says, okay, well, you know what? The exposure factor of me getting shot by a bullet walking down the street is 100%. Well, I could put a bulletproof vest on, but what if that bullet goes in, where that bulletproof vest isn't? Well, that exposure factor is still there, right? Because it's still a possibility. Many safeguards have an applied ARO that is similar than the safeguarded ARO, but is often not 0. With the new annualized rate of occurrence, possibly new exposure factor, a new annualized loss expectancy with the application of the safeguard can be compared. With the pre-safeguarded annualized loss expectancy and the post-safeguarded annualized loss expectancy calculated, there is yet one more value needed to perform the cost-benefit analysis. This additional value is the annual cost of the safeguard. Calculating safeguard costs for each specific risk, you must evaluate one or more safeguards, countermeasures, on a cost-benefits basis. To perform this evaluation, you must first compile a list of safeguards for each threat. If you're dealing with network security issues on the edge, you're going to be looking at firewalls, intrusion detection systems. You're looking for those things that can protect you on that edge. Okay, well, you need to look at each one of them and get their value and how much they cost you annually, and then you need to figure out what the effect is going to be on reducing that threat. Then you assign each safeguard the deployment value. You must measure the deployment value or of the cost of safeguard against the value to protect the asset. As I said, The value of the protected asset, therefore, determines the maximum expenditure for the protection mechanism. If the threat that is likely to come through on the internet side is, we'll say a threat of $50,000, and the cost of putting in a firewall is, $75,000. Well, in a single year, that may not make sense, right? Because you're spending more than what the value is of that, the asset it's attacking, right? But if you break that out and we say, okay, we'll only expect to have, one attack a year, or 0.1% of an attack a year, well, then over time that cost might be sufficient, right? It might be okay at that point to implement that firewall or that IDS or whatever it may be. Remember that it is not prudent to spend more dollars on a safeguard countermeasure than the value of the asset you're protecting. If the cost of implementing a safeguard countermeasure is higher than the value of the asset, then you should accept the risk or find a cheaper countermeasure. Factors involved in calculating the value of safeguard and countermeasure are: 1, cost of the purchase, development, and licensing; cost of implementation and customization; cost of annual operation, maintenance, administration; cost of annual repairs and upgrades; productivity, improvement or loss; changes to the environment; cost of testing and evaluating, right? So these are all things that go into that actual total cost of that countermeasure. It's not just what you put on the paper for that year. It's what is built in. That includes your time that it takes to maintain that system, etc. So there are more things than just the dollar value that you're paying the vendor for that product. Once you know the potential cost of a safeguard, it is then possible to evaluate the benefit of that safeguard if applied to the infrastructure. Again, the annual cost of the safeguard should not exceed the expected annual cost of asset loss. Calculating safeguard cost and benefit. One of the final computations in the process is the cost and benefit calculation or analysis to determine whether a safeguard actually improves security without costing too much. To make the determination of whether the safeguard is financially equitable, use the following formula: ALE before safeguard minus ALE after implementing safeguard minus annual cost of safeguard, ACS. This gives you the value of the safeguard to the company. Or, and another way to look at the formula is ALE pre minus ALE post minus ACS, the value, again, of the safeguard of the company. If the result is negative when you come out of this equation, the safeguard is not financially responsible choice. If the result is positive, then that value of the annual savings your organization may reap from deploying the safeguard because of the rate of occurrence is not guaranteed. The annual savings or loss from a safeguard should not be the only consideration when evaluating safeguards. You should also consider legal responsibility and prudent due care. In some cases, it makes more sense to lose money in the deployment of the safeguard than to risk legal liability in the event of asset disclosure or loss. In review, to perform the cost-benefit analysis of a safeguard, you must calculate the following 3 elements: the pre-countermeasure ALE costs, right? The post-countermeasure of the ALE costs, and the ACS. With 3 elements, you can finally obtain a value for the cost-benefit formula for the specific safeguard against a specific risk, against a specific asset, right? So, quick and dirty formula is ALE1 minus ALE2 minus ACS gives you that value. The countermeasure with the greatest resulting value from the cost-benefit formula makes the most economic sense to deploy against the specific asset and threat pairing. All right, here's a quick and dirty table of formulas so that you can, have those, and these are in your book, right? So just look at those and, kind of go through there, and if you want some, some word problems or something to go with these things to help you understand them better, email me, I'll send you some, and they'll really help you to understand these. And if I get some time, I'll send them to everybody anyway, but just as a reminder, if you want some of those, send them to me and I'll get them over to you. Again, exposure factor is represented by a percentage. Single loss expectancy is represented by, asset value times exposure factor. Your annualized rate of occurrence, ARO, is a number divided by the year, right? And then your annualized loss expectancy, ALE, is your single loss expectancy times your annualized rate of occurrence, or annualized loss expectancy equals your asset value times exposure factor times annualized rate of occurrence, right? So you're going to see probably, if you ever do take this test, if that goes down your line, your ALE calculation's more than likely going to be your far right model, right? I've seen it both ways, but I've seen it the far right more because they want you to know what all three of those aspects are. Your annualized cost of the safeguard is a dollar figure divided by the year. How many years? Whatever it could be, how many occurrences that happen at that time. The value or benefit of the safeguard, again, is ALE 1 minus ALE 2 minus ACS. Final notes. It is important to remember that the end values you produce with the calculations for quantitative risk assessment are used for prioritization and selection. The value do not truly reflect real-world loss or costs due to security breaches, okay? These are costs that you all come up with or the company comes up with. These things are what it costs to you, not what it may cost to somebody else. This is not the sole element of data needed to make decisions on what to implement. Other factors include actual cost, right? Security budget. We might not have the budget to implement these things. Capability with the existing systems. Are they compatible? Are they going to cause problems? If not, we need to find something else. Skill, knowledge of staff. Are our staff ready to take this on? Do they have the knowledge to take it on? Or they have past experience with that product, you know? Or do we need to get them trained on it? How much would that cost us? How much time would that cost us? And the product availability, well, that may, depending on what time of the year it is and who's manufacturing, what kind of tariffs we got going on, may depict all that. You have to take all of this into account to make the best security decision for your organization. And whenever you're taking these things and you're prioritizing them, you're prioritizing them normally about, okay, we see what the highest risk item is, what is the most detrimental to us, and we try to attack that first, right? We don't have that in the budget right now. Well, you know, we start going down the chain and get the ones we can get to, but hopefully we can focus our budget that year to get the highest risk property taken care of first. And then we'll go through, as we come through this chapter, we'll go into more of understanding what and accepting risk, and you know what's a deterrent. What all different categories do we have when we're going through and grading risk. It'll help us to understand what we can push off to a third party, what we can accept as a risk, what we declare really isn't a risk to us, but it could be a risk to somebody else, kind of thing. So we'll really get into that in the next week's talks. It's kind of a long and kind of grueling understanding, vocabulary-wise and formula-wise, so I didn't want to really inundate you with so much that you didn't have a chance to soak it in. That's the end of week 5, guys. Kind of short and sweet. If you have questions, let me know again. Got feedback, please share it. Also, if you want some paragraph examples to help work through some of those formulas, email me and I'll be glad to get those to you. Anybody got any questions or thoughts right now?
No. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Unknown participant is now exiting. Unknown participant is now exiting.